instability in government is the biggest enemy of progress. I want to tell you that in Nelson Mandela Bay, there's been 57 municipal managers since 2009. 57. There's been 10 mayors since 2009. I'm the 10th one. And that has resulted in an exponential decline of a metro municipality that was probably one of the most functional and well-run metropolitan municipalities over the last couple of years.
Well, this week it seems like the politicians are getting me up nice and early. It's another early morning start today with Retief Odendaal, the executive mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay. We haven't spoken since 7 months ago, his very first day in office. Well, it'd be interesting to find out exactly what's going on in what has got to be the toughest mayoral job in the country today. Mr. Mayor, thanks for joining us. It has to be the toughest job because apart from the fact that you've got many parties in your coalition, you can explain to us exactly how many. You've also got an MEC who wants to effectively kick all the councillors out and take control of Nelson Mandela Bay. So let's start with the first point. This coalition of yours, how many are there and are they behaving themselves?
Good morning, Alec. Well, look, it is no easy job that I can certainly attest to. This is the biggest coalition that's ever been put together in South Africa. And I've got some colleagues that say that it's probably currently the biggest coalition in the world. I'm not too sure about that. But 10 parties, obviously, as you can imagine, it's not a walk in the park. It is difficult to manage, and there are problems that arise every now and again. But I think that we have been able to stabilize the administration, and we've been able to work relatively well together. And I think that the reason for this, everybody wants to know how are you managing it and why are you guys working so well together. Well, we decided from the get-go that if this is going to work, there's going to be no big brother in this coalition. So notwithstanding the fact that the DA, who is essentially the foundation of this coalition, have got 48 seats, and then the next big party, the Northern Alliance, have got 3 seats. Notwithstanding that, we consider ourselves to be equal partners. We take collective decisions. So we try and take the egos out of the coalition. And we try and focus on the issues at hand. And believe you me, Nelson Mandela Bay was systematically broken down over the last couple of years. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I think that as a coalition, we have probably been more stable than smaller coalitions in the country elsewhere, certainly in some of our metropolitan municipalities up country.
That's a very interesting opening discussion, because earlier this week I spoke to both Herman Mashaba and to Gayton McKenzie, who are with smaller parties. Well, obviously Action SA has not really been tested yet at the ballot box, and the Patriotic Alliance is on it appears to be on a very rapid expansion. But both of them at the moment in the coalitions that they're involved in felt at times that they were not being treated anything like equals, and in fact that they were being told what to do. And so we've had great turbulence where they were involved. Now, the message that I'm hearing from you is almost like an example that it felt a bit like your leader of the DA, John Steenhuisen, was trying to put across in his re-election speech, that if we're going to make coalitions work in South Africa, you can't have a big brother. You've got to actually work together.
I think, look, I want to make it very clear that in the past I've also seen how, especially my party, the Democratic Alliance, is often accused of being arrogant and being the so-called big brother in coalitions, or having a big brother attitude. I think often that is unfair, and people are some parties are trying to hide behind that excuse for their own reasons. But I'm sure that speaking from my perspective, there's no other way to make this work. You have to focus on the job at hand. You have to put your own interests aside. You have to put your party political interest aside, really. And I think that if we as political parties want to prove to the electorate out there that there can be a credible alternative to the ANC at the national level. We must be able to prove that we can work together at a local government level without falling apart at every corner, so to speak. So I think that it is it's a test for us. And I also want to just say that it is clear to me as well that unfortunately all political parties have not necessarily reached political maturity. And I say this because sometimes people find it difficult to put their own political party interest aside. And I suppose that's the nature of politics. But those political parties, the ones that the electorate can spot, that is responsible for coalition instability, they need to be punished at the ballot box. And I wish that our electorate can realize that ultimately they determine their future. They determine their future. They determine what the governments look like in the cities and towns and municipalities, also the provincial, national level. But at the end of the day, if it is a coalition, they also have to look at who is partaking in that coalition arrangement and how these parties behave. Do they make you proud? Do they really represent your interests? Or are they trying to move from the one coalition to the other, going to the highest bidder? Because instability in government is the biggest enemy of progress. I want to tell you that in Nelson Mandela Bay, there's been 57 municipal managers since 2009. 57. There's been 10 mayors since 2009. I'm the 10th one. And that has resulted in an exponential decline of a metro municipality that was probably one of the most functional and well-run metropolitan municipalities over the last couple of years. Up until about, I would say, 2009. And since then, we've seen an exponential decline. One of the areas I want to highlight is, and it just shows the decline of Nelson Mandela Bay, is the amount of irregular expenditure on our annual financial statements. It's 20 billion rand.
Explain that, Mr. Mayor. What is irregular expenditure for people who don't know how accounts work?
Irregular expenditure is expenditure that was incurred in contravention or outside of our supply chain procedures and legislation. Which means that it either represented deviations or just gross irregularities in terms of supply chain processes. But it was done by design so that proper supply chain processes could be circumvented. Now, that 20 billion rand is more than any other municipality, exponentially. It is more than any other provincial government. It is more than national government has spent on irregular expenditure. It just highlights what has happened here in Nelson Mandela Bay over the last couple of years and how looting from the state was facilitated.
That's extraordinary. So Nelson Mandela Bay would be what, about the fifth or the sixth biggest metro in South Africa, I presume?
The fifth, if I remember correctly.
And you saying that there are rules in place. If you're working for the public, you're a public servant. If you're working for the city, that you have to follow before you spend money. But the rules have been broken to such a degree that in this metro, the irregular expenditure, in other words, the money that was spent outside of the rules, breaking the rules, which could have been looting, it could have been, it shouldn't have been done, is bigger than any other municipality in South Africa. And you say even bigger than the government.
Bigger than national government. Yeah. So, that is how big the problem here in Nelson Mandela Bay. That's also why service delivery, especially over the last 3 years, have come to a grinding halt. Because supply chain was broken, officials started becoming more cautious, because doing a deviation upon a deviation, being unable to get contracts through supply chain, then meant that they had to put their signature on a document, basically correcting supply chain flaws or correcting a contract that was approved outside of the supply chain regulation. And they were just not prepared to do that anymore. As a result, some of the contracts that we had to finalize now was, for example, a simple contract to be able to purchase paint for road markings. There hasn't been any road markings done in Nelson Bay for about 2 years up until we came back in office. Another one is the fact that for about 2.5 years, we couldn't secure a contract to purchase miscellaneous equipment and material for electricity and energy. So as a result, we had thousands of temporary connections because they couldn't be electricity connections. They couldn't be fixed permanently because there was no material in the stores because there wasn't a contract in place. Those are the type of things that we struggled with in the city. And I'm very happy to say that we've been making steady progress. On supply chain specifically, we have requested National Treasury to assist us in providing us with guidance as to how we get out of this mess. And I have to say, a lot of politicians will always bash government. I had a good support from National Treasury up to now, very good support. And I also want to say that we amidst one of the most serious drought crises on record, and also the support that we've been receiving from National Department of Water Affairs have been amazing. I think that possibly that is because they realize the challenges that the city has had, and they're just so happy that there's a receptive government that actually want to listen to them and to respond positively.
Well, I'm sure that the ratepayers are absolutely delighted. When I visited your city some time ago, and I know it well, I spent some years there many, many years ago, but I'd never seen so much despondency. That was before September last year when the new multi-party coalition took over. So today, 7 months on, they must be feeling that at least there is some hope into the future. But what have you managed to do in those 7 months, apart from finding out where all the problems were, or presumably you got your hands around that now?
So, Alec, I think I want to start off by saying that I try and be as brutally frank and honest as possible. And I tell our residents how broken the administration was and the fact that it actually still is broken. But I also tell them what the plans are to fix it. Because it's very easy to break down an administration, any government entity or department. You could break it down fairly easy, but to rebuild and to make sure that you get your institutions back up in place in the way that it should be is very, very difficult. So, no, we're very, very happy about the progress that we've made. One of the biggest challenges that we've had, and maybe I should start there, is our drought crisis. You know that June last year, about a third of the city was days away from being without any potable water indefinitely until it rained again. And that was the situation was actually exacerbated by the fact that the city over-extracted from its dams, notwithstanding the fact that these dams were at single-digit levels. We over-extracted from the dams, and then it rained. We got a wonderful short reprieve because the heavens opened and our dams got a little bit of capacity again. So when we got in, we did the calculations and we saw that it is a mathematical certainty that we are going to run out of water and that a third of the city was going to run dry. And so we took a decision. I personally took control of communications on the drought. And I started warning residents to say, listen, we're going to have to make tough decisions. And so for a couple of months, we just bombarded our residents with messaging about how important it is to reduce consumption, and that there is drought fatigue. We know that, but at the end of the day, it's a mathematical certainty that we will run out of water. And then we started reducing our extraction from our dams, even though on any given day, there would have been a deficit in supply, which means that demand exceeded supply, and certain areas were without water. And it was difficult because that was a decision that essentially was taken by our government to leave people without water, because our argument was We will rather have you without water for a day or 2 or 3 than having no water at all indefinitely. And we also at the same time fast-tracked a number of drought mitigation, water augmentation projects which we brought online. And you know that since October last year, and I mean, also full disclosure, the majority of those projects were in the pipeline already. We just fast-tracked it. Many of them were delayed, unfortunately should have been completed long ago. But we fast-tracked it. And as of October last year, since then we've brought 100 megaliters of additional water into the city on a daily basis. We've prevented day zero. I can tell you now with mathematical certainty that Mandela Bay will not run out because we manage our resources far better and far more responsibly. We stick within the restrictions that was imposed by Department of Water Affairs on us. So I think that was probably our biggest achievement. Our second biggest achievement, I think, is the fact that we've managed to unblock various blockages in terms of basic service delivery. You know, when we got here, there was a backlog of, if I remember correctly, about 15,000 potholes because we couldn't fix potholes. There were a backlog of 7,000 leaks that we had to fix because contractors weren't in place. There were thousands of sewer blockages, more than 10,000 streetlights that were out. And we managed to basically erase those backlogs. Yes, we do still have service delivery issues. You know, we haven't yet gotten to a 48-hour turnaround time to fix potholes, but we've seen an exponential increase in service delivery turnaround time. Very important also is the fact that the city has got a massive housing backlog. Now, you must remember that Mandela Bay is the poorest metropolitan municipality in the country. That's GDP per capita, but also the metro municipality with the highest unemployment rate in the country. So, socioeconomic circumstances is relatively bad in the city, and as a result, there is a massive housing crisis as well. But notwithstanding that, in the financial year, 2 years ago, so that would make it 2021, only 27 houses were built. 27. The year after that, only 28 houses were built. And if you go back 10 years ago, on average, the city built between 2,000 and 2,500 housing units a year. Well, we have managed to fast-track housing delivery, get it back on track. And we are well on our way to complete 800 housing units by the end of this financial year. And I think that, that is the kind of story that we want to tell. The last thing I just want to also mention is the fact that we have been, over the last few years, the city has lost nearly R1 billion in grant funding because of an inability to spend. And that is mostly also because our supply chain was so broken and we just couldn't spend the money because it was...
couldn't even steal it. So they couldn't steal it, they couldn't spend it, it was just broken. Yeah.
So it was sent back to National Treasury, and they disseminated the money to other municipalities. In a city with our kind of backlog, that is criminal, absolutely criminal. So we, to the best of our ability, we try to make sure that we allocate dual funding to projects so that if we do underspend, we don't underspend grant funding. And we started monitoring expenditure by our specific departments. And I believe that we are on track to spend our money this year. And if we do underspend, it will certainly not be the gross unexpenditure that we've seen in the past. And we've also managed to convince national government to give us in excess of about 900 million rand over the next 3 years to invest in water infrastructure. So we basically getting back what we've lost, and that was done through a lot of back channeling, but also by basically cutting out our heart and serving it to Department of Water Affairs, saying to them, listen, we know that we've been wayward in that this city has not listened to the advices. But you can clearly see that we are doing the right thing now, that we're taking the difficult decision, that we're listening to your advice, and help us. We need your help. And lo and behold, we got that allocation.
There was once
so
a
it's all about
president.
building relations.
Yeah, there was once a president in South Africa who used to talk about, we've got a good story to tell. Unfortunately, he didn't. In your case, you certainly do. But now we also have on the other side an acute embarrassment to the ruling party in South Africa with an election just a year away from us. For those of us outside of the micro picture in Nelson Mandela Bay, it appeared as though the ANC was trying to block you guys from doing what you have done, certainly at a provincial level. Now, where's all of that gone to, and how serious was it?
So no, it's still very much playing off behind the scenes. So for those that don't know, the MEC for local government decided that he wanted to change the system of governance in Nelson Mandela Bay from a mayoral executive system to a collective executive. And what that meant was that there wouldn't be an executive mayor, and that instead of a mayoral committee, there would be a collective executive committee, which would automatically afford 4 seats to the ANC permanently, 4 seats to the DA, 1 to the EFF, and 1 to the Northern Alliance. So we said that there was a massive procedural flaw in how the MEC approached this, and we believe that he did it for political expediency reasons, because it happened to be implemented at the same time that the DA and other parties formed a new coalition. So the timing was very suspicious, but there was a massive procedural flaw. So I declared, it was actually one of my first formal acts as an executive mayor. The second day after being elected, I wrote a letter to the MEC, and I declared an intergovernmental relations dispute on this issue. And lo and behold, I was ignored. I can't believe why, because disputes between governments are regulated by IGR legislation. It's legislative. And then by December, they decided, the MEC decided to impose this on us. And then myself and my party, the DA, reverted to the courts. I specifically kept Nelson Mandela Bay municipality out of the court case and the legislation, because I don't think it's fair that a municipality be dragged into political disputes, or what I see as a and ever since we've been in court, and we're actually waiting for the outcome of Part A of our application, and that was an interdict to prevent the MEC from proceeding. So that's very much ongoing in the back. But we believe that we've got excellent merits, and we also believe that we're doing this not just for Nelson Mandela Bay, but also for other municipalities in the country as well. I think that one must understand there must be a healthy respect from the ruling party for democracy, and if you don't perform in a government, you must be able to be removed. You cannot try and force your way into municipalities, making sure that you've got access to executive positions indefinitely, just because you failed in the past. Rather clean up your act and convince the electorate that you can govern again. And I think that the ANC has got it right, and hopefully they'll start looking inwardly and realize what they need to do to convince the electorate that they can govern again.
What an extraordinary story, and a message of hope, great hope for the future of South Africa. On the other hand, also a very bright spotlight being shined on the political shenanigans of the ruling political party. Not just did the Zondo Commission show that the ANC steals, but now we're seeing that it wants to keep its hands on the tiller, even though it can't perform or hasn't performed. Retief Odendaal is the executive mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, and I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews.com.